It's all yours. Thank you. Good morning. It is great to be back with you, and I'm glad to be able to bring Sandy with me. Co-chairs Kukesh, Anderson, President Kitka, delegates and elders. It really is my honor to be with you again. I have to welcome another guest, Senator Akaka of Hawaii. We're so glad to have you here and thankful for you being here. Let's give the senator a hand. And Mayor Reggie Jewell, are you here this morning? Did I miss you? Are you here? Well, we're going to miss Reggie in the halls of the legislature, but I know he'll serve the Northwest Arctic Borough well as mayor, and I look forward to working with him in that new role. The Success Beyond Barriers theme gave me pause. It made me think about those words and frankly about each word. Success Beyond Barriers, the theme of the conference this year. You know, how do we measure success? Perhaps we first have got to ask ourselves what we consider to be our greatest treasure. What is that? Is it ourself? Is it wealth? Is it others? Is it our family? Is it our God? Where our treasure is, there our heart will be. And our Alaska treasure is our youth. And last night, Sandy and I returned from Homer on an airplane, and I had the privilege of sitting next to a seventh grader from a rural community outside of Homer. And I asked him what his dream was. What did he want to do with his life? And he said he wanted to be a helicopter pilot. And I had the opportunity to talk to him about the Air National Guard and Army National Guard and how they would pay him to train to be a helicopter pilot if that's what he wanted to do. And there were lots of ways to learn how to be a helicopter pilot. But I also told him, you've got to stay in school. You've got to get good grades and work hard. And when things get hard up front like that in your classes, and when you're bored with your classes or when you think you can't do it, keep that goal out in front of you. Keep that dream, that treasure in front of you. Because it's so easy for us to focus on the barriers when they are so close and they're so personal and so hard. Some of those barriers we create for ourselves, and some of them are handed to us. Some of those barriers, like lies that go around our head, lies that say, I'm no good, or lies that say, how can anybody really love me? You know, those are just what I said. Those are lies. And here's the truth. Every person, every Alaskan in this room has value. Every person has worth. Doesn't matter what's going on in your head, believe that truth. And the world can put up barriers too. Structural barriers, economic barriers, educational barriers. Those who have worked for me since I was lieutenant governor know that when I speak with staff or cabinet, they know that I tell them our job is to clear paths of opportunity, erase those barriers so that you can know success and you can live your dream. I want to introduce a few people who are responsible to you and serving you in those roles. Lieutenant Governor Meade Treadwell is here. Meade, would you stand up? We also have virtually our entire cabinet serving you, and if members of the cabinet, if you would stand up, please, just so you know that they're here as well. Our job is not to guarantee success, but it is to assure more opportunity for you. That's the life and mission of a public servant and of your public officials. One of those barriers to success is fear for one's safety. Well, no Alaskan should have to settle for living a life of fear of physical violence. That's why we're determined to knock down the barrier of fear. I know this, if Alaskans will stand with Alaskans, fear can be overcome and safety can be restored to our homes and to our communities. You already know of my great love for you as a people. You know my love for Alaska communities. I will not back down. I will continue to protect, and our administration will continue to protect every woman, every child, and yes, every man who's a victim of domestic violence and sexual assault. Also, if you know me at all, you know that I love, cherish, and respect my wife of 25 years, Sandy, and her heart has always been for the children, ours and yours. I wanted to share something that she's been learning more about, something that we didn't realize was happening here in Alaska, but something that we need to raise awareness on. And so if you would, please welcome my wife, First Lady of Alaska, Sandy Parnell.
Delegates, elders, and friends, it's truly an honor to be here with you today. I'm speaking to you as a mother of two daughters that we love very much, just as you love and cherish your children. And that's why I was really disturbed to learn that at past AFN conventions, our children, Alaska's youth, have been targeted by sex traffickers. Now, I had always thought about sex trafficking as being kind of on an international level, being something that happens far away. But the truth is that sex trafficking happens in this state, and it's largely Alaskans trafficking other Alaskans. And this is a difficult topic to bring up, but I think for the sake of our children, we need to discuss it. So, what is sex trafficking? It is modern-day slavery. Sex trafficking occurs when a child is made to perform a sex act in exchange for something of value, whether it be money, food, or shelter. It also happens when a person is induced by fraud, force, or coercion to perform a commercial sex act. You know, in the past, we've used the term child prostitute, but prostitute denotes a willingness or choice, that term. And any child being used for prostitution is being trafficked. They're not being prostituted by choice, but rather by coercion. And they are victims of a serious crime. Victims are often teenagers, even as young as 13. Traffickers target them in malls, on the streets, at bus stations, anywhere kids gather. Children who have been sexually abused are especially vulnerable. Homeless youth are vulnerable. 1 in 3 teens on the street will be lured into trafficking within the first 48 hours of leaving home. And it may start out as couch surfing, but then it turns into survival sex, trading sex for a place to stay or a hot meal. Girls from rural communities coming to Anchorage are vulnerable, especially if their support system fails or housing falls through and they find themselves on the street. Traffickers entice girls by offers of new clothing, getting hair and nails done, and a place to stay. They're told they're special and that they will be taken care of. Sometimes during this grooming stage, while things are still going well, the girls are told to recruit family members or friends. But then it turns ugly and very, very violent. They are beaten, sexually assaulted, manipulated, deliberately addicted to drugs and alcohol, and systematically abused for their traffickers' financial gain. Well, what are we doing to end this evil? This past legislative session, the governor sponsored and signed human trafficking legislation, making trafficking a serious felony, subject to Alaska's most severe penalty. Senate Bill 210 established a task force to help Alaska gain a greater understanding of this issue, and the group will report its findings to the legislature on January 15th. Cook Inlet Tribal Council recently convened a working group of agencies and nonprofits involved in this arena, and this month they released a very comprehensive proposal of action. This will be very useful in proceeding forward. The Anchorage Police Department, FBI, and Covenant House have also been working very hard on this issue, and the faith community is also getting involved. As families, the best protection we can give our children is a loving home. A home where they are safe, not exposed to domestic violence or sexual assault. because those most vulnerable to trafficking have suffered prior abuse. A community where neighbors are vigilant and let each other know if something isn't right. And we need to educate our kids about this issue, so if they are approached by someone with an offer of something too good to be true, they know it's too good to be true. As you enjoy AFN, please keep your loved ones safe. Know where your kids are and who they're with. In closing, a story of a young woman here in Anchorage. She was one of the victims of a big sex trafficking ring. She was in a rough place, had developed a tough exterior to protect her wounded heart. The trafficker who made millions off of women was arrested, prosecuted, and put in prison. But what happened to his victims? For this woman, it was a life-saving moment when her trafficker was put in prison. There were some people in our law enforcement community who knew she was a worthy person, and slowly, trust developed. This led to helping her value herself enough to get into treatment and overcome her drug addiction. And today, she has overcome her past and is moving forward in a restored life. I've often pictured the solution to violence against our people as a jigsaw puzzle. Government, agencies, and nonprofits are all pieces of that puzzle. Families, communities, churches, and every Alaskan interlocking together. It takes each piece to form the whole. So please join me in standing against the trafficking of our women and youth and stand for freedom from human bondage and sexual violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sandy. I think you heard her heart. I think you heard her heart for Alaska's children, for ours and for yours, and for a future for them beyond those barriers. Part of erasing fear is awareness. It's arming ourselves with knowledge about how to protect our families, and I appreciate you giving us the permission to do that here this morning. Because Sandy is right, providing loving homes free of abuse, that's something we can do. Knowledge leads to action. And I want to just say thank you and offer a word of encouragement to you. Say how proud we are of you and our 120 plus communities that have stepped forward annually in the Choose Respect initiative to host marches and rallies every spring. This last March, Sandy and I were in Huslia for their Choose Respect march, along with John Mueller, our Rural Affairs Director. We joined together to march along the river and through town. And I just got to tell you, every time you do this, you send a loud message. You inspire the victims and survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault to be courageous and to step out and get help. Because you march, the barrier of silence and fear is broken. More Alaskans are set free. Additionally, I made a promise that's tied to this Choose Respect initiative to you in 2009 to add 15 village public safety officers annually and the trooper support to help them so that our communities, your communities, would be safer. And we continue to build that safety net of protection for every community. Now, we need even more Alaskans to step up as VPSOs. And if you're interested in serving, if you've got a heart for protection for our communities, there's a booth downstairs for you to talk with our Department of Public Safety people. They'd love to speak with you. In addition to new VPSOs, we've put new trooper posts in Immonik and Selawik. We got a long ways to go to remove this barrier of fear, but together we're making progress. It's not only through marching and rallying, but it is through listening to each other and learning from each other. And during this past year, I visited many communities, as has Sandy. And I want to take a moment to show you some of what we've experienced, some of your beauty, some of the beauty of this great land. If you could watch the screens, please. That last scene was from a trip this summer to Dillingham to honor members of the Alaska Territorial Guard. That's exactly why we're doing this, because back in the 40s, then Governor Greening flew a float plane from community to community to raise up scouts, to raise up members of the Alaska Territorial Guard. They monitored Alaska's waterways to ensure safe passage of our allies. They set up food and supply caches, and they served as nurses. They never asked for recognition or compensation, yet their service will not be forgotten. For several years now, the Division of Military and Veterans Affairs has documented the service of these Guard members that are still living. It's never too late to thank someone for their sacrifice. We deeply appreciate all of our Territorial Guard veterans and all of our veterans of military service. Let's give them all a round of applause. We've lost some good friends this year that we want to acknowledge and honor. My good friend, the late Senator Al Adams, Marge Baker, Niles Caesar, Catherine Atla, Mabel Pike, Richard Frank, and many more mentors, cultural icons, political leaders, civic leaders, bridge builders. And it's with thankful hearts that we honor these Alaskans who succeeded by knocking down barriers. You know, success for us also means a good education. There have been barriers to that in Alaska. But since I first became your governor, we've knocked down the roadblock of a funding practice that disadvantaged rural school construction. Now, when more urban districts get school construction funds from the legislature, so do rural schools. This year, we funded school construction in Emonic and Koliganek, and we anticipate funding the school in Nightmute next year. We resolved the Kasili and more court cases, putting millions of dollars into rural school infrastructure and programs. We've knocked down the financial barrier of college and job training with the Alaska Performance Scholarships. Now, every high school student can earn their way to a post-secondary education. And I want to stop there and just pause for a moment and tell you, when somebody says that rural students cannot get Alaska Performance Scholarships, I want you to help us understand why, because I will work with you, just as Louisiana did 2 decades ago, to make sure that every rural student has access to those scholarships. We've knocked down the barrier of low educational expectations by raising high school graduation standards. We've asked for a waiver from No Child Left Behind because one size does not fit all in Alaska. It never has. And as one size does not fit all in education, we know that local economies are not the same. Many of our rural households and communities rely on Alaska's fisheries as a part of culture and food and the local economy. This was a tough year, especially for king salmon runs. And I've been very concerned about how some of our neighbors, how many Alaskans are going to struggle through this winter. So here's what we're doing. First, I requested and received federal disaster declarations for the Yukon and Kuskokwim, as well as for Cook Inlet. We're working with our congressional delegation to get an appropriation for that. Second, I convened a panel of scientists and experts to get information. They've analyzed gaps in our understanding of Chinook salmon throughout their life cycle. They've recommended additional research be done. Next Monday and Tuesday, this panel will meet just a few blocks from here at the Egan Center and host a scientific forum in Anchorage to discuss needed research and stock assessment. You are encouraged to participate in that forum. Third, I appointed a special assistant to be our governor's office knowledge specialist on fisheries. She's with us today. Would you help me welcome Stephanie Moreland? Stephanie, where are you this morning? I hope she's in the back waving. Okay. Welcome, Stephanie. Fourth, our departments have worked diligently to make sure that those who are eligible for assistance actually apply for it. You know, I'm thankful to see our communities embrace private business growth, especially small businesses. My father and mother fed us with a small business, and I fed our family for about 9 years with a small business. Small businesses account for 177,000 jobs in this state. People in every community in this state want to work, so I applaud you for searching out new ideas, for ways to build economies that coexist with the honor and meaning of subsistence living. Examples like the Lodge at Wood River, the Port at Hoona, Quick Pack Fisheries, just to name a few. These are pivotal developments in rural business enterprise, and there are more on your drawing tables. High energy costs, another barrier. They stall local economies and cause Alaskan families to suffer real financial hardship. You know that very closely. And over the past 2 budget cycles, the state has funded nearly $1.5 billion for energy infrastructure and investments. We've set an aggressive energy policy for our state. There's more to do to bring more affordable, more abundant, cleaner energy to Alaskans. Thankfully, I think we're at a place where we're finishing one chapter of Alaska's energy history, and we're transitioning to writing that new chapter. One where we move away from high-cost diesel and heating oil. One where we move towards natural gas and propane and to hydropower. We need to invest in long-term energy solutions, like using Alaska's gas and water resources, rather than becoming increasingly dependent on high-cost fuel oil. The traditional cultures are foundational to the successes of every community in our state as a whole. This year, the Chief Shakes Tribal House in Wrangell was completed with assistance from state funds. We've also been supportive of culturally rich approaches like the Magnet School in Kotzebue. To assist with preserving the treasured traditional languages, the legislature created and I approved the Alaska Language Preservation Council. And today I want to announce the members. Stephen Walkie Charles of Fairbanks. Got your own cheering section. Dolores Churchill of Ketchikan. April Counselor of Kodiak. Bernadette Alvana Stimful of Nome. Annette Evans Smith of Anchorage. You know, these people are passionate about serving. They've given their lives and their careers to preserving culture and language in our communities. And like you, they seek to build bridges and knock down barriers to success. So I appreciate your willingness to serve. Thank you. And now it's my privilege, as I conclude today, to announce this year's Shirley Dementoff Award. It's a tradition where we honor a person or organization who shares Shirley's passion for protecting and promoting respect for Alaska Native women and children. This year's honoree is Mary Jane Fate. Mrs. Fate is an Athabascan, born and raised on a trap line in Rampart to the late Sally Woods Evans Hudson and Thomas George Evans. After graduating from Mount Edgecombe High School, she was one of the first Native women of her generation to attend the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where she studied accounting. The university awarded her an honorary PhD of Laws degree in 1992. She worked hard for the passage of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, taking the minutes during many statewide and interior meetings to achieve that milestone legislation. It keeps saying Mrs. Fate in here. I know it was Mary Jane, but I also want to honor her. Mrs. Fate also was instrumental in establishing the Breast Cancer Detection Center in Fairbanks to provide mobile mammograms and education in rural Alaska. She was a founding member of the Fairbanks Native Association, the Tundra Times newspaper, the Institute of Alaska Native Arts, and she's the past president of the North American Indian Women's Association. The first woman co-chair of AFN, a director on the Alaska Airlines corporate board for 25 years. Mary Jane served as University of Alaska Regent and as the only Indigenous member on the U.S. Arctic Research Commission during her term. She's been a board member for 40 years and former president of her Village Corporation. Among her many other firsts, Mary Jane was the first Alaska Native woman to serve on the Alaska Judicial Council. So John Moeller, will you please escort Mary Jane Fate to the podium? As she's coming to the podium, I have to say a few more words, because Mary Jane, her life is a positive example of how we each can make a difference wherever we are. You are an Alaska Native leader who has led and advanced the health and safety of Alaska Natives. And while accomplishing so many firsts, you've always been there for those in need. You've provided a place to stay. You've wrote letters of recommendations, made scholarships. These are no small blessings to the many students and the families you've helped. You've always shown the world that while there are acts of Congress, there are also significant acts of human kindness, and they matter greatly. The individuals whose lives you've touched include the many people in villages who are served by the dental clinics you and your husband, Dr. Hugh Bud Fate, made possible. And here's how she's been described: as a selfless person who always kept a smile on your face, even during tough times, reassuring those around you that things would be okay. As a woman who made sure that after fish camp, elders in Fairbanks received their smoked salmon. That's how your 4 children and your 12 grandchildren know you. We know you as a bridge builder, a peacemaker, one who's always brought together people to make things happen. So let's thank her for her service and help congratulate Mary Jane Fate.